Amy Adams is a licensed clinical social worker and chief financial officer of Healthy Screen Habits. She has a master's degree in social work from UCLA and is a credentialed school social worker in California. Amy has worked in elementary, middle, and high schools and is passionate about helping children and families navigate the digital world and establish healthy digital habits. Jeannie Ondelacy Sprague is an educator, writer, advocate, and chief operating officer of Healthy Screen Habits. She has worked with children in elementary schools throughout Los Angeles, Chicago, and Seattle areas. She obtained a master's of education degree in educational psychology from Loyola University Chicago and became passionate about understanding the ways in which technology impacts childhood and adolescent development, social, emotional growth, and learning. Thank you so much to both of you for being here. It's the first time I've had two people.
Well, we're happy to be here.
So can I start with you, Jeannie? So let's start with talking about the Healthy Screen Habits training workbook, which is right here. And I love it personally. So let me ask you something about that first. You liken the Healthy Screen Habits training workbook to a driver's ed course. So why do teens and tweens need training before they receive their first device?
So if you take that fully out, the analogy, we don't give the keys to the car to a young teen without having full courses and all the rules and regs of driving. And then they have to have practice before they get in the car and actually start driving. And the reason that we feel that that's the same way for the phone is because it has the potential for so much good, but there's also danger, just like with a car. It's great if you have a car and you can drive it well, but there are obviously lots of dangers ahead without any knowledge prior to getting in. So with the phone, it's the same thing. So many great things that can come, so much good that can be used with phones. But the dangers are real and they're out there. And we're seeing that affect kids all the time with mental health, with the anxiety, depression, the loneliness epidemic, to name just a few of the things. And this technology rolled out before anybody really knew what to do with it. As adults, we kind of got swept up in that and didn't have any rules in place. And we're just kind of figuring it out. And now as time has passed, we see that there is real danger out there. And we feel strongly that in order for kids to be able to use it wisely, they need to be taught how to use it. And so that is the goal of our workbook, is that we give them all the rules and regs, all the reasons why they need to be mindful of the things out there, and giving them the opportunity to see, okay, I get to have a choice in how I use this technology, and it can be used for good, but I need to choose it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. I'm going to add to that because I think you guys know I'm a social media marketer. I've been doing this since 2007, and I can tell you with certainty that these are adult products. So the iPhone, social media, frankly, all of it, they are designed for adults, right? Like there are some kid-friendly tech products that are designed with kids in mind, but just like a car, which is an adult product, like that's what we're talking about here. So I think the idea of a training course, like it's the level of seriousness is about the same, right? As operating a car.
Absolutely.
You know, that's
Absolutely.
the way I look at it. So it shouldn't be taken lightly, basically. And I think the training book elevates it, but you guys do make it fun too, which I like. You know, you're doing it in a way that doesn't feel, I don't know, preachy or dry or anything. You're just kind of giving kids all the tools. But yeah, just like a car, it's an adult product. So can I come push on that a little bit more? Amy, can I ask you about, let's use the car metaphor a little bit further. So the first car was invented in 1886. The first legislation governing vehicles was not enacted until 1914, which is 28 years later. So let's connect that to the iPhone, which was invented in 2007. And I would argue really not until 2010, where iPhone 4 came out and the front facing camera and social media became, you know, prominent on iPhones, was it really what it is now? So all that said, we currently don't have legislation yet to help kids stay healthy and safe online. So why do you think that is? I've sort of set you up for an answer, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, anytime we have any kind of new technology, whether it's a car or a cell phone or really anything, we're so excited about that technology that we kind of fail to think about maybe what are some of the unintended consequences. Because anytime we do anything, there's an effect and there's an opposite effect, right? And so the last time we had legislation passed was COPA in 1998. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about it, that was like when the internet was nascent, right? And
Yeah.
that was before smartphones, before social media. And so, if you follow what's going on right now, there's a lot, and we don't have time to talk about that, but there's a lot of stuff happening right now in, back east in Washington to hopefully remedy that and make some new policy and legislation, which we're really excited about. But in the meantime, we're dealing now with, we've had the iPhone now since the same year my daughter was born in 2007. The iPhone was also born. And yet we, just like you said, we've seen no new legislation about that. So sometimes we're so excited about, can we do something, that we don't think should we do it? And so really that's what we've noticed, that big gap in, we've got this great technology, but what do we do with it, with how it's actually harming us too? So we're trying to change that.
Yeah, I mean, to push on that a little more, we're at that phase where there were no lines on the road or seatbelts, right?
Yep.
Like if we have to connect those dots. And I think at this point, we all kind of agree, okay, a seatbelt's a pretty good thing, So that's
Right. No
but
one's gonna deny that.
there is a little pushback even towards that. I remember, a little background about me. My dad was a designer. He designed airbags, and that was way
okay.
back when airbags were a new thing. And there's a lot of push against that of like,
Yeah.
why do we want to do those? We don't need those. And now we recognize that airbags are an integral part of every car that's made. But at the time when he was designing them, he was brand new in the industry. It was kind of seen as like, that's not really necessary. Well,
Right.
that's kind of the same way tech is. Some people feel, oh, it's not necessary. Kids will be fine. They'll figure it out. But they really need help. We all need help, but especially kids need help because they don't have that fully developed brain.
Yeah. And not to mention, cars didn't change a whole lot between when they came out and when the legislation came out. Technology has evolved so quickly just in the
Yeah.
past 15 years. I mean, we need it even more for that reason, right? Like it's
Mhm.
evolving faster than we can keep up as a
Right.
society, but also the human brain as well. So yeah, I agree. Like we could spend a whole hour talking about what's happening on the legislative front. Hopefully things are coming. But I think it's just really interesting for parents to, I think, consider that, because I think a lot of parents have a bit of a blind spot and maybe trust that these things are safe or somebody has thought about it.
Right.
But
Right.
Right.
I don't know that
But they
they
haven't.
realize that they haven't,
Mhm.
we're
Right.
not even there yet. So, so that's so true. That's so interesting about the airbags too. Cause yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
I think every time there's any kind of effort like this, we do see pushback. So
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so Jeannie, back to you. I have a bit of a loaded question, and we sort of covered it already, but I'd love to hear your answer to this. So, are smartphones like iPhone designed for kids?
No, absolutely not. And you said it well. It's an adult product
Yeah.
and it's gotten into the hands of kids because I think, like you said, and like Amy was saying, we just assume that the technology that comes out is in our best interest. It's good. It's going forward. It's, yay. But it's not done with children in mind. And
Yeah.
so we know for a fact that designers are tapping into our psychology and are using our brains against us to get our attention, the whole attention economy. How long can we keep you on this product? We become the product.
Yeah.
Our attention is what they're after so they can make money off of it. And so like our Surgeon General said, we're pitting kids against the best designers and the best minds in design, and that's just not a fair fight. So these kids have no chance of overcoming this product that is literally trying to capture their attention all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think my perspective, because my background's actually before social media, is really in design. I went to design school. I studied with the people that create products, basically, right? And my perspective is really simple on this, which is if you have to put a parent control on, it's not designed for your kids. If it's a product,
That's so true.
Really good.
if it's a product that you can't just hand to them, like, I don't know, when my kids are younger, I wouldn't hand them a knife, right? They weren't ready to use it. They weren't trained on it, whatever. So I think that in itself is telling, right? If we have to put a retrofit on it, because that's what a parent control is, it's a retrofit. That's very telling, not to mention how hard it is to set up iPhone parent controls, right?
Oh, absolutely. They do not make it easy.
And they glitch and they all kinds of things.
There's no safety in mind for kids.
Nope.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I don't think parents realize how easy it is for kids to work around them. Maybe not when they're younger, but somebody's going to show them how to do it, or they're going to figure out how to do it themselves when they get older.
YouTube will show them.
Right.
YouTube will show them. An older sibling will show them. So
absolutely. And I think, we talk about these devices being tools, and I think that was the ideal, but they're no longer tools because, like so many have said, if the tool is demanding your attention, is trying to get you to pick it up, it's not really a tool anymore. Right. So like your analogy with a knife, that is a tool because it's not demanding the attention, and you can have safety features and be able to, have them learn how to use it. But at this point, these devices, they're not tools and they're not really helpful for our kids. Yeah. So that begs the question, why are we handing them to them?
Yeah, I know. Okay. So back, Jeannie, I wanted to ask you what age you think is appropriate and healthy then to introduce a smartphone and social media. We can do those separately or together.
Research is showing, again, that the longer you hold out, the better off your child is. Yeah. There's the great program, Wait Until 8th. We love that idea. Jonathan Haidt has come out with Anxious Generation. He pushes for a later date than that. Somewhere around 14 or high school seems to be, studies are showing that is when their brains are developed a little bit more, impulse control is a little more under control, and they're able to handle some of that. Of course, that's with guidance. It's with training. It's with teaching. It's with lots of dialogue and conversation. Social media, totally different animal. That should be delayed as long as possible. 16 would be the bare minimum. Yep. They're just not equipped emotionally to handle the ramifications that come with the likes and the oh, you're not included in this picture, and all of the things that we're seeing kids suffer with anxiety and depression because they're just not emotionally ready for that any younger than 16. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're resonating with the 14 plus 16 plus, basically, which I am now seeing as the latest expert consensus. Yeah. Many experts, me included, a couple of years ago were hesitant to give age requirements. I think everybody's like, everybody's different. Kids are ready at different times. But I actually think parents are looking for that. They really want to know what the data says about what's appropriate and safe. And I couldn't agree with you more. I'm absolutely in the Wait Till 8th camp. One clarification, Wait Till 8th, they're actually saying end of 8th grade. So what they're saying, as well as Jonathan Haidt, is to keep them out of middle school. I think his main point about that has to deal with many of the most, the times for harm are most prevalent during those years. Not to mention the maturity, which you've covered already. So just statistically, the data, everything else, experts, I mean, it just goes on and on. France came out, they did a huge study and said the same thing. So you've got governments, you've got experts, you've got everybody resonating around this age. So I couldn't agree with that more. And the 16 plus for social media, I absolutely agree with that as well. I think it goes back to the car. It's the same age we say, okay, you can start driving. I do think there is some benefit in, and I think one of you might have mentioned this already, having that time to help your kids maybe through that before they're off on their own, right? So, but you don't have to, you don't have to say yes at 16. Your kid might not be ready for that even at that age. But I think having those couple years of like again, if we use the car analogy again, it's like the, what is that called where you can drive with the parent before you can drive?
The permit.
Right.
My son just got that this week.
There you go. So
And my daughter's working on hers. So we're right there.
yeah. So maybe we could think of that as the permit stage, because I would say even at 16, there needs to be so much oversight, so many conversations.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I don't think they're ready at 16 to be on their own yet. And then the last thing that you spoke to, which I think is so important for parents to understand, is the social exclusion aspect. So yes, it's hard to wait, because your kids will feel left out. But once they get it, and I've been asking all my experts and pushing them on this, and they've all agreed that the social exclusion is actually harder once you get it. Because like you talked about, like you're going to now publicly see that party that you were left out of.
Exactly. It's in your face at that point.
It's in your face. It's visceral. It's visual. You're reading it. You're seeing the likes and the comments and everything come in live. Where maybe if you didn't have it, you might find out about it on the Monday morning or whatever, but it just wouldn't have that same impact. It makes social exclusion now supercharged and public once you do have it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's something again where I think maybe easier for an older teen to handle, but very difficult for middle and younger high school kids. So I just wanted to add to that because you brought those points up, and it's just so true.
Right, because these are already things, Amy and I talk about this all the time, that teens were already experiencing.
Yeah.
Like, think back to your teen years, those feelings of exclusion, they were already there, but now social media amplifies them in such a hard way, like you said, a visceral way, where they just feel extremely crushed and excluded and like they don't have a place anymore.
It's like all the worst parts of adolescence amplified.
Right.
Absolutely. We call it just has supercharged all these things. Like
Yeah.
we all grew up with social comparison. We grew up with FOMO. We grew up with social exclusion, but we could get a respite from it, like even if these things were happening during the school day, you could go home, have a break from it, maybe come back to it. Let's say there was a rumor, maybe it was contained to your class, your grade, your school at the very worst, right? So maybe a couple thousand kids at the very most, but it would fade. People would forget about it. These kids now, I just feel for them so much because those issues were hard enough back then.
Right.
And now we have this, let's turn this up to 1,000 to 1,000,000, right? And it's just so hard. And I don't think parents think about that. I think they are kind of thinking of that first part of social exclusion, right? Which is, I don't want them to be left out of the group chat or the whatever TikTok trend or whatever their friends are talking about. But I don't think they're thinking about the after part so much. So, okay. So Amy, I have a simple question for you, but I think it's really important. Why is it so important to turn phones in at night and keep them out of bedrooms?
Okay, so this is something I feel so passionate about. And I'll tell you why. I work with kids every single day. I'm a school social worker. And if I could give them one gift, it would be this: keep your phone or any kind of connected device out of your bedroom. Yeah. In fact, at Healthy Screen Habits, we've distilled like all of the research and all of the knowledge we've distilled into 5 core healthy screen habits. And we talk about them in our workbook. But your question actually covers 2 of these habits. One of them being give your phone a bedtime. Yeah. You have a bedtime, your phone needs a bedtime, everyone needs a bedtime. And one of our other habits, which is phones should never go into bedrooms or bathrooms. Yeah. And the reason, there's so many reasons why. We call it our 5 S's. I like alliteration. So I like the 5 S thing. So I'm going to tell you 5 S's of why we feel so strongly about this. The first one, the absolute most important thing, is sleep. Yeah. So if we want to increase our mental health, our physical health, our well-being in general, get better sleep. Well, how do we get better sleep? We get better sleep when we don't have a device constantly calling our name, constantly calling out, pick us up, pick me up, pick me up. Because remember, it's trying to get us to utilize it. So let's get that device out of the bedrooms because our kids deserve sleep. And like I said, I talk to a lot of kids, and I always ask kids, what time do you go to bed? And they'll tell me one answer. And then I say, well, what time do you go to sleep? And they'll be like, like 2 a.m., because they're in bed and their parents think they are sleeping, but they are in fact on their phone till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And then sometimes kids will say things like, well, I just wake up at 6 after a couple hours of sleep and I grab a Monster and I'm good. Well, that is terrible, because not only for your physical well-being, but your emotional and mental well-being. I mean, we've all pulled all-nighters before and we feel horrible.
Yeah.
And kids don't even recognize the connection. Like many kids, they don't even get that sleep contributes to well-being. But as parents, we know this, and we have a duty and a responsibility to protect their sleep. So that's the first most important S, followed by number 2, which would be salacious content. So you're less likely to look at salacious content or engage with it, if you're with other people. When you're behind closed doors, a lot of stuff can happen that you don't want to happen. So if we want to really help our kids kind of avoid some of that stuff, let's keep the phones out of the bedroom. Number 3, sexual predators. So predators need 2 things in order to get to our kids. They need vulnerability and they need access. Well, we provide both of those things really easily for them if we allow phones in the bedroom, because they have access to our kids 24 hours a day if they're in the bedroom, remember, behind a closed door. And then vulnerability. Your bedroom is a place of respite. It's a place of where you are vulnerable, right? You dress in your pajamas, you do things in there that the world doesn't see. And so you kind of take your guard down, and that's exactly what they're hoping for. And they can get in on those levels. So, also, what a 4th S here is social isolation. What happens now with kind of the modern American family is everyone comes home from work and school and they go right into their bedrooms and they flop down on their bed. The kids flop down on their bed, whatever. They look, and then they spend the next how many hours on their phones. Well, if we don't allow phones in the bedrooms, even if the kids are on their phones, they're going to be on their phones in a public place. So at least they'll be within proximity of parents, of siblings, of the dog, whatever. So we really want to keep them out, because we want families to spend time together and to actually be together. Yeah. And then finally, which for me is really near and dear to my heart as well, is this concept of we want our kids to have a status sanctuary. Kids, adolescents especially, are assessed all day long. It's all about comparison. It's all about how well they're doing in comparison to their peers, in comparison to themselves. So online, there's a million metrics you can look up every day online, all day long, 24/7, least of which is like grades, right? We've got, whatever, your school uses, but we use like max preps, which is like your sports, stats. You got sports stats, you got grade stats, you've got the whole social media stats, you've got video games. All of those things are like just dripping with comparison, with status. And that is exhausting. If we want to talk about anxiety, that's what promotes anxiety, is this concept of you're always performing, you're always on, you're always being assessed. And it's just too much. So our kids deserve a special place where it's a sanctuary, where they don't have to worry about their status, where they're not going to be exposed to a million voices or a million reminders of where they fall in on the social hierarchy. And so when we provide that bedroom as a special place, that's where they can journal. That's where they can just think. That's where they can draw. That's where they can do a million things that have nothing to do with their status. And we all deserve that. So we feel really, really strongly that it's both for mental and physical and emotional well-being.
Yeah, I love all that. And what's nice about it is I think you do cover every single benefit in one little short, easy to remember, way with the 5 S's. But the other thing I want to add too is we do a lot of parent eds, and by the time you get to middle and high school, the parents sometimes feel helpless, right? Because you've in it and they feel like they can't put the genie back in the bottle. But don't you think implementing that one simple rule and saying, maybe we didn't have this before, but this is what we're doing now. Don't you think that would be like a really quick way that parents can maybe get a hold of that use if it's already taking place? Right?
Yeah.
That one simple change.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. It's a really, and you'll get resistance, right? Because
Yeah,
anytime you try to implement a change, but I always approach it with like, I didn't know that. I didn't
exactly.
know, just like I didn't know I was supposed to use a seatbelt, but now I do. So now our family's going to start using seatbelts. I didn't know that your
Yep.
sleep was getting disrupted by having the phone. Now I know better, and I'm actually responsible for your safety and well-being. And I think we have to own that responsibility and stop thinking our kids can take care of themselves with that, because they don't have the capability yet, quite yet, in their brains to be able
Yeah.
to do that. We
Yeah.
don't trust them to vote, to drive, to drink alcohol until a certain age. So why do we expect that this would be any different?
Yeah. And to just piggyback on that, back to this idea that tech is changing so much and it's a brand new issue. I think it's absolutely okay as a parent to say, you know what, we made a mistake. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
You can use tools for that. Like, for example, your workbook, you could say, I read this workbook. Wow, I had no idea. I learned so much. I want to share it with you. Or, wow, there's this new study that came out. It's brand new. I didn't know about it, and use it to back you up, you know? And
Yeah.
I think that's a really great way. We've been telling parents to sort of utilize these methods of saying, you know, whoops, I made a mistake. I learned something. And I think that's modeling something good for your kids too, right?
Mhm.
That
Absolutely.
everybody
Yeah.
makes mistakes,
We
right?
make mistakes too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody does.
there's real strength in that, and then they know, okay, well, that mom's human, dad's human,
Yeah,
I'm human, and this is what happens, and then we grow from it, we learn from it, we go
exactly.
forward now.
Right, right. So it's just like one simple thing that any family can do, regardless of their
Yeah.
Hmm.
age.
Like if you do one thing, do that thing,
Right.
right? All
Yeah,
the other things
exactly.
are great and gravy, but like do that thing.
Yep,
That will have the biggest bang for your buck.
yep,
Honestly, that's my one biggest wish for
yep.
every family to
I
implement.
I agree, and many of the other experts are saying the same thing. Like if you
Yeah.
just do one thing, so
Hmm.
absolutely. Okay, Jeannie, I'd love to ask you why families should have a tech plan before introducing a smartphone.
Getting everybody on board literally on the same page with a plan is probably the best way to make sure that everybody knows what to expect and what's happening. And having a plan in place, just everybody is clear. These are the things that we do as a family, and these are to protect you, to help you, to guide you to use this tool wisely. It's just something that can help everybody understand we're using this as a tool. We're using it in the way we want to use it. We're using it as our family sees is the best use of this device. And so having that plan in place is a really critical step so that, you can come back and say, well, look, you chose to do this instead. We talked about it. And now we're going to pull it back and make sure that we are using it the way that we if intended to use it. And, we have a plan on our website that's downloadable and it's
Mhm.
customizable because every family is different. But we really feel strongly like having the whole family gather around and like as our family we do it like once a year, just kind of revisit it because they grow and things change and they're using different devices or whatever, just to revisit it to make sure that, okay, do we really understand what we want to do as a family and what you are trying to accomplish as a human as you're growing, and making sure that those things are said. But when they are participating in it, they're getting the buy-in that, okay, yeah, I'm active in how I use this product, how I use this tool, how I use this service. And it's not just it's happening to me, but I am an active part in how I am using this device. And so it's really important to have a plan in place.
Yeah. Um, it's a little bit of work in the beginning, right? But I don't think parents realize how much headache it'll save to have
Yeah.
all these things worked out and agreed upon in advance.
Right.
The other thing I hear a lot, you guys probably hear this too, is when like mom and dad have differences in their philosophies, right?
Hmm.
About tech use, or maybe one has a little bit more problematic use than the other, right? It's a way to also get the adults on the same page. So
Definitely.
that's really
Absolutely.
important. Like you said, as a family, it's not just you're handing it to your kid and saying, these are the rules and,
Right.
Hmm.
break.
Hmm.
No, it's like we're just documenting these ideas that we're going to agree upon as a family. So I think that's a really important way to do that too. And I love how you emphasize that you can change it, because that's the other thing. Like first of all, tech's changing so much, your kids are
Mm-hmm.
growing, maybe habits have changed, whatever it is. I don't think people realize either that this is something that should be and can be fluid, right?
Right.
And
It
Yeah.
grows
reevaluated.
with your family.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought all those things up. That's so good. Okay. So Amy, I want to come back to some of what we talked about already, which is attention economy. And you
Mm-hmm.
defined that well before, but let's just get into a little bit of the statistics. So teens are checking their phones 100 times a day. Quarter of them say they're online, quote unquote, almost constantly. Kids age 11 to 17 receive a median of 237 notifications a day. About a quarter of those are during the school day. So, can we get into what are some examples of some of the addictive features used by big tech to keep kids online longer, and maybe how teens can avoid some of these?
Okay. Well, they use lots of tricks. And Jeannie referred to this quote before, but our Surgeon General came out last year with an advisory for social media and teens, which was fabulous. We were so appreciative of that support at the national level. And one of the things that really stuck out to us that he said was, you're pitting kids, basically, you're pitting a child against the world's greatest designers, and that's just not a fair fight. And so we have to, first of all, remember that it's not our kids' fault and it's not our fault either. They are very intelligent. They know how to hack into kind of human psychology. So we got to start at that level instead of like blaming our kids and what's wrong with you or what's wrong with us. Let's give us a little bit of grace and realize like this is really, really hard. But just to mention a few of the tricks they use color, they use, there's a thing in our world called stopping cues, right? Where for thousands of years, we've known when the sun goes down, that's our cue that it's time to be done with work. It's time to go to bed. It's time to be done with the day. But what technology companies have successfully done is basically taken away all stopping cues. They don't ever want us to stop scrolling, because it's the attention economy. The more we scroll, the more they get. So what do? They appeal to emotions. They appeal to that social status. They appeal to all those things that are uber important to teenagers, especially, right? Mm-hmm. One of the big things they do is this concept of like what enrages engages. We know from algorithms, right, that algorithms are designed to suck you in, and they're going to feed you the content that is most likely to engage you. And that content that is most likely to engage you is the stuff that gets your emotions really like boiling. Like, you're less likely to share a cat video than you are to share something political or something filled with hate. And that's just the way our minds work. We are really like sucked in by our emotions. Now, remember too, kids have really big emotions. And so they really can get sucked in by that kind of stuff. So because they're not willing to help us and they're doing everything they can to lure us back in, and even when we're not in, then they'll send us a notification like, oh, it's been a while, come back and visit us. What we have a lot of suggestions. We talk about it in our book. We talk about several hacks that kids can use, but I'll just go over a couple of them, which is number one, we'd say like turn off notifications. Like no one needs a notification 50,000 times a day that on Instagram that someone else liked your post. Like go to Instagram or go to any social media when you want to go to social media, not when they're telling you to go. So turn off notifications. Another huge one I feel like is really important. I have teenagers, of course, so we do this in our house is we put time limits on all apps. Yeah. So whatever app we've decided in our family tech plan that we have, then we put a time limit on it. So I don't think my 17-year-old daughter needs more than 15 minutes on social media. I want that. That's her stopping cue. And then it blocks it at that limit. And she's not sucked into all of those negative feelings, all of those things. She gets to see what she needs or wants to see, and then she's done with the day. You can do grayscale. You can do downtime at night. Like we said, a big one is turning your phone in at night, but just these are the kind of the little hacks that we can, do with our kids. We can turn off autoplay. Netflix, they famously said that they're in competition with sleep, basically YouTube and sleep for you, for your attention. So we got to like fight against their desire to earn money off of us. So if we can do, especially like I'm a really huge proponent, especially of the time limits.
Yeah. Time limits do work. It's like the one thing that everybody agrees on. Again, another, I think, pretty simple thing that we can all kind of do. And again, if you don't have them already, if you have a middle or high schooler, something you can implement and just say, I read this recently. I read that it works, or I read that American teens are spending 5 hours a day on social media. Wow. Like whatever it is, use any little statistic or tidbit or anything else. And again, these are so simple. And turning off notifications, like, I so agree with you. It's such a big part of it. And so many young kids, teens, they don't even know you can do that.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just they've grown up with this, so it's not
yeah,
new or different or weird to them. It's like, of course, they're going to be constantly
yeah,
called by the whatever social media platform.
Well,
yeah,
that's the default too,
Yeah.
is for all those things to
right,
be on and not
right,
off. So
right. So those are, again, so simple and easy, like anybody can do those things.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to push a little bit on negative bias because you touched on that. And this is something I learned more recently, but it's super fascinating because we talk a lot about evolution and kind of what we're evolved, to be as humans, and how we're still evolved for the Paleolithic era, basically in a time of scarcity. But another thing I read more recently was that, again, think hunter gatherers, the people during that time that paid more attention to negative dangers were the ones that survived. So we're actually wired to pay attention to more negative anything, right? And because of attention economy and what you said, like you're more likely to share something, negative or comment on something where you're fighting versus when something's just nice. Goes back to them kind of hacking into our primal instincts. And again, there's nothing wrong with you for paying attention to something that's negative. That's the way what you're wired to do. But I think if kids can understand this, maybe they can have a little bit more awareness about it too. So I don't know if you guys have
it's
heard
really,
that.
it's really like both building awareness and helping them understand, as well as then doing the actual little hacks, right?
Yeah.
I always tell my kids, I care about your brain. I care about your hearts,
Yeah.
And help pointing that out, that their brains are being hacked if they're, looking at this longer than they wanted to look at because of the lights and this and then that and the bells and whistles. So I love their brains, I tell them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I want to just touch on one more thing, which is screen etiquette. So important. And I think one of the other things that is just not taught at all. So Amy, what are your main screen etiquette tips for young smartphone users?
Okay, so that goes back to, once again, we have, like I said, those 5 healthy screen habits, our core habits. We call them our core habits. And I'm going to give you 2 more of those that relate to this topic. And one of them is the grandma rule.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't want your grandma to see it, don't look at it, don't post it, don't share it, don't like it, run away, right? And everyone understands that, right? Everyone feels that sense of like, oh yeah, I don't want grandma, if I say that mean thing and grandma saw me say that terrible thing to that person, she'd be mad at me or whatever. So that's a really easy one for kids to understand. We all feel that way. And it's really good and when we're teaching on a variety of levels, right? Cyberbullying, inappropriate content, just all kinds of stuff the grandma rule applies for. And one of our other core habits is put the phone away or on silent, where it's not going to bother you when you're with other people. We don't ever want the phone to be the third person in the room because the phone kind of acts like it's a person now, like it demands your attention. It wants to be part of the conversation. And what research has shown us is that even the mere presence of a phone being out in our hand makes a conversation turn more shallow.
Yeah.
So, we have this loneliness epidemic. That's another advisory that the Surgeon General has put out a couple of years ago. And part of that is because even when we're together, our conversations feel a little bit cheaper. They feel a little bit like less deep and less whatever, because there's always that phone, and that phone could beep at any time, pulling the other person away. So you're less likely to share something really big from your heart if you know that phone is going to take attention away from the other person in the room. So we really want to treat the phone like a tool and get that where a tool belongs, which is in your pocket until you need it, versus like out in front of your face when you're with another person. We really want, when people are together, we want them to be together.
Yeah. When you were talking about that, it reminded me of that Sherry Turkle quote, which is so true. I think it's "We are forever elsewhere." I don't know if you've heard that one.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're so right. Like, I don't think people realize that when that thing is there, the brain is, there's like a tethering to it that we don't even realize is happening on probably an unconscious level. But this is why, like Dr. Anna Lemke talks about self-finding, right? Like when you actually know you can't get to it, it's going to kind of create that barrier between yourself and any substance, which is potentially addictive, which is what we're talking about here. But yeah, I mean, as simple as putting it away in a bag, like if you're in a meeting, or I mean, at the very least, putting it face down on the table, right, is signaling to that other person that you have my attention. Where anything else is, like you said, that third party in the room. So I just love it because it's so simple, you know, what you guys are talking about. And so I just want to thank you both so much. I really, really love the workbook. I think I told you offline, but in my opinion, it should be mandated somehow. If we could mandate this like we do with private ed, I think that would make a huge difference, because kids are smart. If you arm them with information, if you teach them to be good critical thinkers, it makes a huge difference, regardless of, yes, their brains are still growing. But we really believe that if they have all the information, they will make better choices. And I think the workbook just does that beautifully. So thank you both. I really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you
so much.
Thanks.